What's up, everyone? Welcome to a Between the Games episode of Short Game Long Talk. Jess is not here today. It's just me, Eric, and for the first time, my friend and former fellow content creator, Jordan from Cognitive Clips or Cognitive Glitch or Cognitive anything. He is a YouTuber primarily, and also featured on just about anybody else's podcast that will ask him. So if you have a podcast out there, go ahead and reach out. Jordan, introduce yourself a little bit more specifically than I just did.
That may be my new favorite intro that I've ever been given. Yes, though. Yeah, I'm Jordan. My channel is Cognitive Clips on YouTube. Same handle on Threads, which I'm pretty active on, and Instagram. As Eric was saying, I do some YouTube content, mostly video essays, kind of going into sometimes it's a specific game, sometimes it's a different topic, but been doing that for a few months now.
Genre of
Genres,
games.
yeah.
Yeah, I watched a couple
Got a
this
couple.
morning.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm flattered. Um, I, I've decided that I'm going to like co-opt that other, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Yeah, I'm always a guest host, but never a host. I don't have my own podcast, but I do hop on Spotlight Games podcast a couple of times. I've shared that same Spotlight, pun very much intended, with the wonderful ladies over at JK Games podcast.
Yeah.
Talked to our mutual friend Derek over at Good Games Casually
Mm-hmm.
once or twice. So
Yeah, that's a
yeah, it's
fun interview. You guys should go check that out if you want to hear a little bit more backstory on Jordan. Yeah, I honestly, being a podcast guest is like the dream. If I could be a professional podcast guest, like just show up, have fun on a podcast, and then not think about it, and then like, oh, 2 weeks later it's out. Sick. Love that. That's great.
it is pretty nice to obviously I try to make sure that things on my end are gonna sound okay, which is why I have this shiny newer microphone
Oh
from
yeah,
last month. But
yeah.
yeah,
You're
otherwise I'm like I'll let you guys handle the mixing and the editing, and I'll just go
yeah.
play some more games, I guess.
Your channel. I was hopping around a little bit this morning just because I wanted a little refresher on some of your stuff so I could talk about it. And like yeah, going back like 4 or 5 months, and then hearing your audio and then listening to one of your more recent episodes, it's like, yeah, look at that. He's making progress. His sound quality's going up. I love that. It's always
And
the
some of that
easiest thing to upgrade is your sound quality.
yeah, and a lot of that is thanks to folks like you who gave me some tips along the way. So yeah,
Yeah.
shout out to all the people that have already name dropped because I'd be asking questions
Yeah.
like, hey,
Yeah.
which microphone are you using? Hey, which software are you using?
Honestly, it's the best part about which, yeah, we didn't mention it, but Jordan is also part of and one of the founding members of our LFG, Leveling Friends group that we are a part of. And yeah, that's honestly the best part about it is like you got guys like Derek who has only had the podcast for like 6-7 months, but has a lot of experience with that stuff. And then you have somebody like Chris from Nerdlies who has like the setup, and I'm like, bro, if I ever have questions, I just go to him. Like any merch stuff, his merch is like really nice, and like that's such a nice part of the group, which you can join by following the link in the show notes if you want to join. It's a
Oh
fun place. Look at that transition. I love that.
man, that was beautiful, and I cannot let you mention Chris without name dropping the human-sized chicken McNugget pillow of his
Oh yeah, dude.
lurking in the background of all of his streams. I just love it. It's beautiful. It
Yeah,
really
he
is.
dresses it up based off of the time of year too. It's really great. Chris is one of the funniest people that I know, and he will also be a guest on our show later this month, which will be fun.
I cannot wait for that. I'm very
Yeah,
excited to hear that one.
yeah, it should be a fun one. It's going to be a weird one, that's for sure. But I think that's exactly what Chris wants.
No,
Yeah.
no. Not
But
from you two. No.
no, not at all. But why are we here today? We're here because Mr. Jordan is a big JRPG fan. He's got a whole video defending Final Fantasy 16 as a JRPG, which I don't even know, like, I didn't even think of that as an argument, and You do a nice little breakdown. That's worth noting. If you're a fan of this show, Jordan's videos are like under 10 minutes long typically, unless they're like an actual playthrough. So they're nice little tidbits of things, and he has a very nice breakdown of is final like what is a JRPG, what is an RPG, and then like also breaks down the fact that some people think Final Fantasy 16 is not an RPG, which is strange. But yeah, I don't want Jordan to go too much into that because it's a sensitive topic for the guy. Uh, you kind of
That
want to.
was the funniest thing was that, again, just roping into the LFG, when we all did our top 5 games of the year, and Anthony, AKA IMA Shelton, we this was not like a rehearsed thing at all, but he happened to ask me after I said that Final Fantasy 16 was my number 4 of the year.
Hmm.
He was like, "So is it an RPG?" And I was like, "Oh my god, yes, it is." Like
Yes.
he didn't know that I was already like that was one of my like short lists of things to tackle in my video essays next.
Yeah, literally.
But I ended up reaching out to him and I was like, "Hey man, like, can you help me hash this out a little bit?" And so he did, and of course, name dropped him in the show notes for that episode,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
that
But
video. So
another very knowledgeable content creator in our group has been doing it for a long time. So
I have not said this to him, so if he hears this, you're welcome. I would listen to that man read the phone book. I mean, he just has one of those voices where I'm like, "Yeah, I'll listen to you talk,
he does have a very good
whatever it is."
voice. My wife was watching some of the videos with me this morning, and she was like, "I could fall asleep to Jordan's voice." So, which is a
Aw.
compliment I've gotten in the past, because I used to open on YouTube. I used to open like Magic the Gathering cards, and I had plenty of people reach out to me and be like, "Yo, I fall asleep to this one at the end of the day," and I'm like, "All right, cool, thanks, I guess." So, but take it as a compliment because it's a good thing.
I will, yeah.
Yeah. But yes, we're here to talk about JRPGs specifically because kind of a nice little transition into this is like, Jordan, you just finished a brand new game that you just really liked. And I think you finished it in like a week, and it technically falls under our category for a short game, long talk of under 25 hours. Am I correct in
You are
that?
correct. You are correct. That game would be Grand Blue Fantasy Relink.
Hmm.
For I won't go too deep into it. For anyone who doesn't know the background of these games, the original just Grand Blue Fantasy was a mobile/browser game that only like fully released in Japan. So like you technically can go on your phone or your computer right now and log in and play and have it like set to English or whatever, but there was never an iOS or Android app released in the States, but they did have those 2 Grand Blue Fantasy versus fighting games
Yeah, that's how I
that
knew about it.
contain, yeah, and they contain obviously the characters from the story, and then a lot of those characters are also in Relink, which is like an actual just JRPG, has a full story, but uh, yeah, I enjoyed the crap out of that. I could not put it down. The visual style is incredible, kind of like almost like if Tales of Arise or Tears of the Kingdom had more of like a watercolor type of
Mm.
style to it. There is, much like Final Fantasy 16, there was just like endless amounts of flare and explosions and whatever else going on the screen, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
you sent me
utter.
one clip uh, of that, which I think, from what I can tell, was like a pretty early boss fight, right?
Yes,
Yeah, and it was like I got chills, and I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but like, yeah, this is sick. So,
it
and I,
was. Yeah, I think I prefaced it by saying like I just did one of the most anime things in this
yeah,
game, and you were like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "I will show you."
yeah, it was insane. Like, yeah, it's big fighting big creatures like that is always super cool in these type of games because it's an action RPG, right? It's like you have full control. It's
Correct.
not turn based,
That's right.
which can kind of lead into the topic of what RPGs have been in the past, and how they've kind of branched off into like their own subgenres, like so many different subgenres. Because it started out as, yeah, most of them were turn-based RPGs like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, all that kind of stuff. Which, if you don't know, means that you basically, you have your turn, you decide what you do, then it's the enemy's turn, they do what they do, and so on and so forth until one of you has 0 HP. obviously that is the simplistic form of it. They've kind of evolved into some games where I think most recently, like Baldur's Gate, is technically turn based, but it's all determined. It's not just like you go, then they go. There's a whole initiative order, to use D&D terms, where you get to move around and take position and all that kind of stuff. But what is your, like, when you think RPG? What is your first thought? Is it action? Is it turn based? Is it strategy? Like what type of style of games do you think is like RPG to you?
I think that, just plain old RPG, I'm probably gonna think of turn-based.
Hmm.
I was just telling Eric this before we went live that I wanna say my first real intro into more, like, story expansive RPGs was Final Fantasy X. Um, Before that, I did play Pokemon on,
That's
like,
what I
the
was
Game
gonna
Boy.
say. When you told me that off mic, I was like, wait, hold on. Your first game wasn't Pokemon, like most people our age. So I was very
So,
curious.
Final Fantasy X came out when I was 11. Yeah,
Okay,
summer of 2001. And I think that was just the right age where I was probably going into middle school and therefore lying to myself that I didn't like Pokemon anymore. So I
fair.
played the demo for Final Fantasy X and I was like, "Ugh, this is like random encounters. This is like Pokemon. This is stupid." Ate my words. I loved that game.
Of
Uh,
course.
um, but yeah, of course now and as what you were just talking about with so many subgenres and different battle systems and all that, like, that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to make the video that I did, and of course, not to rehash my script from that video or any of that, but, like, yeah, you have just what people would just call an RPG, then you have Japanese RPGs or
Hmm.
JRPGs, you have action RPGs, you have Western RPGs, you have tactical RPGs, you have
Yeah.
tabletop RPGs, and it's like, and even if games aren't in that genre, there are so many games that borrow elements here and there.
Hmm.
Like, I would never call the Sony Spider-Man games RPGs, but you do level up, you do
Yeah.
select new skills to unlock, all those kind of things that
I mean,
first
and
started in
yeah, like
RPGs.
Borderlands, the Borderlands series is a shooting game primarily. It's a looter shooter, but like they have trees and they have like
Yes.
synergies and they have levels and all that stuff that like impacts the way you play the game. And they have classes and yeah, like those are RPG elements, which I don't know if we
One
mentioned,
thing
but
that
it's
I
role
wish
playing games is RPGs. If you didn't know that, we throw that term around so much, and like I catch myself every once in a while because I'll just be throwing these terms out, and my wife will be like, "What are you talking about?" Like, because I also work for an organization that uses a lot of abbreviations and just like kind of alphabet soup, so I forget that sometimes people don't know what that means. And the
Right.
J that you mentioned earlier is Japanese RPGs. And then there's CRPGs, which is computer, which is a whole other bag we can get into later. But yeah, you were saying about the overall like thoughts on like RPGs and JRPGs and all that.
Yeah, they just, like it's such an expansive genre, and, like, no matter what your preferred type of, characters and abilities or, stories or whatever, like, you will be able to find some type of RPG that probably fits in that mold.
Hmm.
And I remember, like, again, just speaking back to Final Fantasy 16 because it's such an easy, just came out last year, still probably on people's minds with DLC coming out that, like, I remember hearing some people arguing that it wasn't an RPG because you didn't create your own character and or make your own, like, choices, but that's a different type of RPG. Like,
Yeah.
you're thinking of, Skyrim and your Fallout and your all your Bethesda games, all your Witcher games, like,
Mm.
those are gonna be, are you gonna kill this peasant or, save his wife or whatever, like, that's a style of RPG, but that's not an all-encompassing, like, defining trait of all of them, and so I do understand why people get confused as
Hmm.
to which games are what, and,
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because it's like most, you know, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy. Honestly, the only outlier of those like OG like Japanese RPGs are like is like Chrono Trigger, where it had like a bunch of different endings and things like that. Like not a lot of games
yeah.
back in the day had different endings. It was just like, yep, you play, you level up, you beat this boss, you go on to the next town, you get some information, you go, like, everyone had the same playing experience. So it's interesting to think that, like, just because Final Fantasy 16 is more, for a lack of a better term, like archaic in its storytelling and story beats and everything like that, where it's like, yeah, you play as this character and you're playing his story, and it's like there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's just part of
Right.
what, like, that is an RPG still, because you're playing a role. And yeah, I guess it's because it's called role playing, right? That can
Right.
be confusing. It's like, well, if I'm not, you're playing the role of that character, kind of thing. So it is interesting to think. But going back to Grand Blue, you said it was like 20-ish hours, right?
I think I rolled credits after about 15,
Wow, that's
maybe
quick.
14 and a half. Which, yeah, as we'll get into for this episode, like, that is kind of an outlier
Yeah.
for the genre. But at the same time, there is a lot of, I don't know if you wanna call it post game, if you wanna call it
Hmm.
end game. I've already doubled that amount of time just continuing to play, like, going out on quests and trying to find these, journal pages is, like, kind of like the, I won't say for whom or anything else
Hmm.
beyond that, but just, like, there's, like, a, like, the main post-game goal that I have right now for myself is, like, oh, like, keep doing these quests and trying to find these pages of this journal to, like, find clues to XYZ.
Yeah.
Um, and I still haven't even finished that after doubling that amount of time focusing exclusively on that quest, so,
And do you
there
feel
still is
like
plenty to do.
do you feel like that's the story is, like, not complete without doing that stuff, or do you feel like it's a situation where it's like, oh yeah, this is just extra, and the ending isn't any less impactful without doing the post game stuff?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the ending is any less impactful. I do like that there are certain characters that get fleshed out more in this post game, and again, it's hard to say anything more than
Hmm.
that, without spoiling anything, but it is cool to kinda get to know those people more, as well as just continuing to enjoy the fantastic combat and visual style of everything that's going on, so it it doesn't feel like it cheapens it. It's
Hmm.
a continuation of the story, but it's not a necessity.
Okay. Yeah, because that's definitely something I wanted to talk a little bit about length of these games, and then kind of, yeah, that ties in with, like, the post game stuff. That is, it's like, oh yeah, the game's only 30 hours, but it's like, well, yeah, but if you want the actual experience and the actual story, you have to do the post game, which is another 50 hours or something like that, with, like, the most difficult boss fights. For you, what do you feel like is like a good length for a RPG or JRPG in general? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, in general, I would probably lean to, like, 25 to 30 maybe,
Hmm.
minimum. Again, exceptions such as Grand Blue Relink. Uh, yeah, I used to put a lot of weight into game length back in the day, and I think that that actually is one of the draws of the genre is that, again, generally speaking, if you're going to be buying an RPG game, then you can expect the long haul, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, when I fire up Metroid Prime for the millionth time, it's a known quantity. I already know, like, even in my first couple of times beating it back in the day, it was somewhere in the 12 to 15-hour range. Like, it's an all-timer, but it's not like, it doesn't have all, like, the fleshed out stories and the side quests and the secret dungeons and the hidden bosses and,
Hmm.
whatever else you may expect to see in, like, in your standard RPG. So, I do think that the length of the games is one of the draws of buying into the genre and specific games, but, yeah, if it's, generally speaking, if it's, 25, 30, that's pretty within the ballpark of what I'd expect it to be.
Yeah,
What about you?
I feel like, for me, so my favorite game ever. So I mean, like, all of my top three games that I recently, like, discussed, of, like, Persona 5, Tears of the Kingdom / Breath of the Wild, and Elden Ring. I all spent, like, over 100 hours in each of those games, and I felt like that was all justified. But then, this show is not about that. If I could play a game that feels like, if I could play a version of Persona 5 that was done in 25 hours and somehow hit, like, similar story beats and all that, that would be the best game of all time, right? Like, that would be crazy. But I think that is part of the reason why these games kind of go too long, for some people's taste, is like it is a lot of story.
Mhm.
It's a lot of character building. It's a lot of growth. It's a lot of journeys, all that kind of thing. And I feel like at least the ones that I have actually committed to, it has been worth it. Because I feel like it's pretty known that a JRPG are typically they're going to be longer, and people are going to be like, this is not worth it, or this is worth it, pretty quickly. Has there ever been a game like for you that you spent a lot of time in, and you're like, when you were done, you're like, this was so not worth like the extra hassle kind of thing?
I'm trying to think. Nothing honestly comes to mind that I feel like was not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
I will say so. One of my favorite games from the past few years is Tales of Arise,
Mm-hmm.
and fits the genre, so it's all very
Except the
spoken.
Tales games, right? I hope you're going to touch on how insane they are with the story,
I
because
actually don't know because Tales of Arise is the first one I ever played.
okay, there we go. Yeah.
But it did again. I'm doing my best not to spoil things for people, because apparently, for anyone who does not know who's listening to this episode right now, just within the past week, I want to say, Tales of Arise was announced as coming to both PlayStation Plus and Game Pass.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So if you like RPGs, action RPGs, whatever, like please play this game. It
Mm-hmm.
is one of my favorites. It's incredible. Um, I will say it pulled I'd call it I like to call it pulling a Return of the King,
Mm.
where you get to a point and you're like, surely the screen's fading to black, so I guess it's credits. Nope, we're still going. Oh, we're
Okay.
fading to nope, we're still going. So it
Gotcha.
wasn't quite that bad, but there's a point in Tales of Arise where everything that you'd played up to that point leads you to believe that, this encounter is probably going to be the final one, if not the final one, then like the penultimate or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but then something else crazy happens, and there's still like another 15 hours of game left.
yeah. Yeah, that.
Which can go either way. For
Yeah.
Tales of Arise specifically, I will say I actually still really enjoyed it. Where it went really helped, like, broaden the scope of what was at stake, still gave some more context to all the characters and their motivations and their own personal arcs.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that it was actually done really well. At the same time, I can see how, like, that could bamboozle somebody, so to speak, or
Yeah.
that could have easily not gone as well as it did. But that's one of the exceptions.
That was literally me with Baldur's Gate. Like Act 3 was like so expansive, so big, and I was like, well, I keep stumbling upon quests, and I'm like, I'm not a person that's going to, cuz I knew it also didn't help that like Persona 3 was like on the horizon for me. So I was like, I got to do everything I can in this game, because if I don't, uh I don't know when I'm going to come back to this. And it just kept like there were so many times where I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this quest, and then after this quest, I can tackle the main quest again. And then I would do this quest, and it would like lead me to another thing that would open up like three other quests. I'm like, I'm never fucking finishing this game. And then finally, like Baldur's Gate gives you these like warnings where it's like, okay, if you proceed here, like there's no turning back. So I got to that point for like the final boss, and I was like, sick. I'm gonna do it. Okay. So I'm gonna save right here. Tomorrow I'm finishing this fucking game. And I was like, there's gotta be only like 2 hours left. So because like obviously I'm gonna go fight the final boss, and then that's gonna be it. And then yeah, I like do that. I go meet up with the final boss. It like totally bamboozles me, and like there was another like 6 hours of gameplay, and I was like, guys, I want to
Why?
finish this game. Like, oh my god. And then that's not even counting like the pro or the epilogue that's like tacked on at the end. And I'm like, this is so I started playing at like 6, like right after work, and then finished at like 12:30 at night because I was like, I can't. I'm like an hour away from finishing the game. I have to, and normally I go to bed at like 11, so I was like struggling the next day. But yeah, that's when it could be done poorly. that being said,
That's not great.
yeah, I will defend Baldur's Gate. Whereas, like, when I go back and play that game, I know there's going to be quests. I'm going to be like, fuck that. I'm not going to even bother, kind of thing. Which is good for future playthroughs. But like, yeah, when it's like, here, oh, you can smell the end, and then they rug pull you, and you're like, ah, you son of a bitch. Like, are you kidding me? Like when that
Yeah,
happens
it's
in a short
not very
game,
nice.
yeah, when it happens in a short game like Metroid, Metroid does it a lot where you like feel like you're close and then they like smack you the fuck down and you have to basically start from scratch. It's like, okay, that's fine. I've been playing this game for like 6 hours. What's another two? But like
Right.
when you reach hour 80 and you think you're close and then it's 20 more hours, you're like, oh my God. Like this is so much longer than I thought. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's so many games these days where whether it's my age, the fact that I've, got 2 kids and the wife and, full-time job, whatever the reasoning is, that, like, I'll just start hitting these points in games regardless of how much I'm enjoying them, where I'm just like, "Yep, it's about time to just go ahead and beeline to the credits, thank you."
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
even Tears of the Kingdom, I had to get that point where I was like, enjoying the crap out of it. It was my favorite game from last
Hmm.
year, like, with no contest. Uh, but eventually I was like, "Okay, I need to I'm ready to see how the story ends."
Hmm.
Like,
And
and
I,
again, that's not a bad thing.
no,
That's just
no.
like, sometimes you get to a point where you want to see how things wrap up, and other times it is because it's like, "Dang it, like, why is this still happening? Like, I thought this was supposed to end an hour ago."
Yeah, and I think Tears of the Kingdom's a perfect example of like, okay, yeah, do the main stuff, and then like you can always come back and dick around in that game. Like it's perfect for that. But
Which
an
is what I was
RPG,
doing earlier today.
yeah, but an RPG is like so final. Like if you don't do as much stuff as you possibly can, there's no going back. Like even with New Game Plus, like you're still starting over, and you still have to go through all the same stuff. Like there's no just like I can't just jump into uh, it's not like, or I guess I should say more like JRPGs specifically, because like I feel like that's the difference with between JRPGs, mostly between them and Western RPGs, is like you can just jump into a Western RPG, dick around for like 6 hours, and be like, yeah, that was fun. I went to the playground, but like JRPGs are like an authored experience typically through and through, even if it is semi customizable. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think that's another thing that we can touch on is like tutorials in RPGs. Like, how do you feel about the mass amount of tutorials that are typically in these games?
Yeah, it can get overwhelming. It can get old. Um, I I'm a big fan of Donkey on YouTube.
Hmm.
It, it, I mean, I know that obviously every game has their fan base. I haven't actually played these games enough to, say I fully agree or don't, but whatever. When he talks about the Xenoblade Chronicles games, it is a riot to me because he'll talk with it. It's like, I've been playing this game for 30 hours. Why am I still seeing tutorials for things to
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, not an RPG, but has RPG elements. Uh, Hi-Fi Rush
Yeah.
had that kind of effect on me where I was like, yeah, it wasn't for the entire game, but I was like a few missions in, and it was like, oh, you can use this thing to upgrade this, and you can. I'm like, I don't
Hmm.
care. I'm not here for that.
I
I'm here
think,
for the humor and the action, and I don't care about upgrading
yeah,
my chips or whatever it was. Like,
for 2% more damage or something like that.
right,
Yeah.
3% cooldown to call in your ally. Like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Thank you. Give me bars. I don't need to see percentages. I just need to see the bars go up. Yeah, the biggest offender to me is, which is another like, so another branch of RPGs is like Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is like 100% an RPG, right? Like you're not really playing it for a story, but you have stats, you have customizable classes, you have all that kind of stuff. You're fighting big monsters, like you get to do things your way, and it has so many influences of RPGs, and mostly because they throw you like 100 different tutorials in the first like 3 hours, and most of it you're not going to know what it is until like hour 15. Um, it's crazy. Like I think bringing it back to Baldur's Gate, I played a campaign for 30 hours and then started over because I was like, okay, I got a grasp on this. Like that's literally what happened to me. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
I played a barbarian berserker for 30 hours, and then I was like, I'm gonna start over. I just like I'm gonna play a different character, and then I played that one for 100 hours. And it's you just don't like. I heard a joke recently on a podcast I was listening to where they're like, yeah, I had to play a whole Persona game to understand what fusing, like how fusing personas actually worked and like the benefit of doing that. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, I can see that. I think the best way to do it is the way so far that Persona 3 has been doing it for me. I might have a little bias just because I did put 160 hours into Persona 5. So like and that was less than a year ago that I finished that game. So I'm like, is it just still in my blood? You know, like when you play a Pokemon game now, right? Like you're not really thinking about the gameplay and the
Right.
tutorials. You're just there because we've been doing it for
You're
20.
begging them not to tell you how to play the damn game like you're
Yeah,
doing.
because we've been doing it for
I know how
20
to throw a
years.
Pokeball.
Yes,
It's a
thank you.
Rattata. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't even want this. It's going in the box. But I feel like they've been doing a really good job of like, okay, look, they introduced how the persona thing works in this world, what you're doing, what like what's the main goal for you right now at the surface level, how a day works, why it's the day, like why it's a calendar system. And I'm not feeling overwhelmed right now. Like I just unlocked the ability to be like to freely do what I want to do in my days. And it's been like 2 3 hours, I think. And like that feels fast to have full control in a JRPG to be able to do what I want to do in like 3 hours in a game. Cause sometimes it's the first 10 and then they're like, here's
That might be a record.
right.
Yeah.
Like, unless it's a shorter game, like I'm sure Grand Blue just kind of throws you into it. Um, but like being able to be like, yeah, I can just go basically wherever I want. And then from what I've heard, as you progress the game story wise, other options will unlock that you can do throughout the day, which is the way it should be done. You should be gradually shown how the inner workings. But if you just if I open up a watch and just show it to you, you're not going to know how any of it works. But if I break down like this, like here are these two cogs, look how they fit together, and then you slowly put the cogs around it and then like, look, it's a watch. Like that makes sense, right? That's how a good art.
Here's the cog, here's the native, and here's the clip. And then
Yes.
you get me. So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Good. That
you
hey,
can
that was very nice. I was
you can
wondering
you can cut that.
I was like, dang, does Jordan actually know the insides of a watch?
No, no, I don't.
But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like if you just throw the finished product at you and they're like, here's all the toys you can play with, and it's like, I don't know, like I have choice paralysis like big time. And I was like, I don't know what to do. But if you like slowly introduce like here's three things you can do. Okay, you've done all of those. You got a good idea. Here's two more things on top of that kind of thing, and like just slowly integrating things because I think that's the intimidating part of games, RPGs in general. Is like you've obviously played Skyrim. Everyone's played Skyrim.
Mhm.
Have you ever touched the alchemy system in that game? Ever?
No.
No. I've only
I
ever done it
don't think I ever did.
if I've only ever done it if somebody like I saw a thread that said, "Hey, if you do this, it makes this easier." And I'm like, "Okay, let's delve into alchemy." But like you can play that whole game without but it's there and somebody that wouldn't be as knowledgeable would make it seem like, "Okay, yeah, you need to do this." Like it's how I play Monster Hunter. I just play with raw damage. Like I just get the biggest hammer that I can that does the most damage and just completely ignore status effects and I'm just going to bonk you on the head as many times as
Just
possible.
roll with my life like King Dedede and just
Yeah, exactly. That's literally how I play that game because it simplifies it. I'm like big numbers go up, heavy hammer hit head, monster dead. And that's it. That's how I play Monster Hunter and it simplifies my life so much. It like
so
go ahead.
I was gonna say, as far as tutorials and stuff, I did appreciate how Grand Blue did it because, opposite they tell you the basics of combat during the prologue or whatever, and then I feel like if they were introducing something like oh, crafting weapons or upgrading weapons or doing quests or finding a side quest. Like it was typically like at the start or at the end of a chapter,
Mhm.
and like one at a time, maybe two that were like less intensive. So I was like, okay, so then you play chapter two, and then when chapter three starts, it's like, oh look, you got this material
Mhm.
as a preset reward for chapter two. So you can use this to take it to this guy, and they'll do this for you or whatever. So like, I like when RPGs and just games in general will do that, where it's like tells you what you need to know when you need to know it,
Exactly.
as opposed to just dumping it all on you.
Yeah.
Um, and they also, if for anyone who doesn't know or didn't check out the demo for Grand Blue, there's God, what is it, like 15 or 20 different characters that you could end up
Oh
unlocking and like
god.
playing as. But there's like a system in game for unlocking them.
Okay.
So it's not like you don't get through the prologue and then just have like 20 people to choose from. You have like six.
Yeah.
And then like I think after one of the first early missions, you get your first. I think it's like a what do they call it? I just call it a recruitment slip.
Mhm.
It's not. I don't think that's the name of it, but like, yeah. So then you use one of those to go unlock another playable character, and like
Mhm.
they're. I won't call them rare, but they're not like raining from the sky either. Like some of them you actually have to work for. You have to do a specific side quest for. You have to complete certain chapters for, or whatever. So like, they do a good job with that as far as like that choice paralysis you mentioned.
Mhm.
And the first time, every single time, the first time you choose a character to like be controlling and like fighting as, it'll give you like a briefing, like two or three windows to scroll through of like, oh, so here's what their square attack does. Here's what their triangle attack does.
Okay.
You can charge this type of attack, blah blah blah, and then it gives you the option right then and there, like, do you want to practice with them real quick?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and you just there's like a practice dummy on the airship
Yeah.
that you just it's just you and the dummy. There's no other enemies or that you can just practice the combos, practice building up the gauges to see what their ultimate attack
Mhm.
looks like or whatever. Like, um, so yeah, I really, really liked how they handled all of that because that could have been really overwhelming. Like,
Mhm.
okay, here's all these characters and just go crazy. It's like I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah, I think it's always a good sign when a game in general, just games in general, give you the option to be like no. Like if they're going to be like, "Hey, do you want to practice with this?" And it's like, "No, I got the hang of it. Like I've been playing games for a very long time. I understand it." It's good to have the option to go do that, but I think you being able to be like, "Do you want to?" And it's like, "No." And they're like, "Okay." Like I think that's really good because sometimes you're like, "Yeah, just I got it. Move on." Like probably by the end when you were unlocking new characters, you're like, yeah, I kind of get how this game works. I don't really need to like go mess around with them unless I really want to. But like I don't need to understand the character anymore. Like 10 hours in.
Yeah, actually, it was interestingly enough, I did find myself practicing just because, again, this is a strength of the game itself is
Mhm.
that the characters will play pretty differently.
That's
So
awesome.
like the captain, the main protagonist, you can choose male or female. And the characters you can name them whatever, the characters will just call them captain or the captain, kind
Hmm.
of like Mass Effect. Like Commander Shepard, like even though you named it Bob Shepard, it's just gonna
Yeah.
say Commander Shepard. Like
I
they have,
played I played through a little bit of Mass Effect last year with my wife, and I don't know if there's any Grey's Anatomy fans out there, but we went with Derek Shepard, which was fun. Got to play as
nice.
brain surgeon Commander Shepard. But you're
I've seen enough to know the reference. So,
yeah.
um, like the captain, he or she uses a sword, and it's like square is the main attack, and you can throw
Hmm.
in triangle attacks for combos, and you can charge a triangle attack, and blah blah blah. And their damage element is like wind powers. But then you could unlock somebody who's a mage, and so they're using, like a spell book kind of a thing with range attacks, and you can unlock somebody who is hand to hand combat, somebody with a giant scythe,
Hmm.
somebody with an axe, somebody with two swords, somebody with a spear, like it, guns even like matchlock type of
Yeah.
guns, and so that they actually do play differently enough to where like if you were interested enough to try to play as them, you may need like a 2 minutes in the
Hmm.
practice session with a dummy. Um, but again, they kind of speaks to being able to play like you can't change, like certain Skyrims or whatever. Like you can
Yeah. Yeah.
play
Yeah.
a certain class and like level up certain weapons. You can't do that, but you can just find the character that has the
Hmm.
weapon that you want to use and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's funny while you were describing all those different characters, I was like, oh, so they made the weapons from Monster Hunter as like people. Because you're like sword and shield, some hammers, a gun. Like those are just all weapons in Monster Hunter, but like those are the classes kind of thing. So that's another Monster Hunter is an RPG kind of thing. That's my
I
stance.
actually I've heard a lot of comparison between Grand Blue Relink and Monster Hunter,
No way.
especially with how the quests are handled because, there are side quests where it's like, "Oh, this guy wants you to kill 5 wyverns or, find this little hidden creature in the level or whatever."
Hmm.
But as far as there is an actual, like, quest counter where you go and you pick from the selection,
Okay.
and then you get prepped, switch out your party, switch out your gear, whatever, hit
Yeah, yeah,
square,
yeah.
sends you into the quest, you do the quest, quest complete, treasure chests, and then it pops you back into, like, the hub
That's
town.
that's very Monster Hunter. Yep, that is 100% Monster Hunter. That's awesome. That makes me want to check it
Yep.
out more because I think that's an interesting take on an RPG instead of being like, here's a big ass world where you're going to walk around and you're going to run into random encounters. And occasionally you're going to get some story beats and you're going to have fun because the combat's probably going to be really engaging. And if it's not, you probably are not going to play this game for very long. But instead, they're just like, here's a quest. Okay, you're in it. Okay, you're done. Okay, you're back. Okay, here's another quest.
I
Like, yeah, like I like that because it's like I think it's because it was a mobile game, right? I'm sure that's the original was a mobile game, and I'm sure they took that DNA of being like people just want to play this like in chunks kind of thing, like while they're on the
had not thought
subway
that.
or something like that. That might be the influence for it.
I like that theory.
Yeah, I mean it would make sense, especially like I think that's one of the big things is there's so many RPGs out there and some of them we've like never we'll probably never see because they're just like mobile games in Japan only. But I think for the most part, I think these games will continue to branch and continue to evolve because like I was thinking while we were talking, I was like Monster Hunter, Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, the Final Fantasy games, uh, Dragon Quest, um, Persona, like all Pokemon. These are all RPGs. Like they fall under that giant of Skyrim, Baldur's Gate. They're all RPGs, and they fall. But those games are all so different. Especially like
Mhm.
Final Fantasy. I love the dichotomy of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, both owned by the same company. Whereas Dragon Quest is like rooted in their tradition of like exactly what you're going to get from a Dragon Quest game, and then Final Fantasy is like let's just go fucking crazy and change it like every single time. I think it's very
You wanted
very.
happiness? Screw you. Here's Clive Rossfield.
Here's this sad man. Yeah, I think it's
Voiced impeccably by Ben Starr, who
y-
I will also listen to read the phone book if
yeah,
he
he's
would let me.
he's got a very good voice. Yeah, I think that's very very interesting to think about. And before we go into some questions that we got, that is for me, like, I think that's the crux of it is like, if people are like, I don't like RPGs, I bet you've played one, like without
Right,
realizing it.
and probably enjoyed it too.
Probably
Even,
really, really enjoyed it.
I think I name dropped the sub genre of it, but even Fire Emblem,
That's what, yes,
those are
I was gonna bring that up too. I was like,
those
wait,
are
I forgot
RPGs, like,
strategy RPGs.
yeah, and which I adore those games, and they're so much fun, but, like, yeah, it's completely different from playing Elden Ring. It's
Mm-hmm.
completely different from playing Final Fantasy. Even the Final Fantasies are different from each other, as you were just hinting at. Like playing Final Fantasy 10 is nothing like playing Final Fantasy 16
Yeah.
or 13 or 12 or 1. Like,
Yeah. And I mean, almost every Zelda game is like,
mhm,
is like baby's first RPG. Like if you
yeah,
play Link to
for
the
sure.
Past, it's very RPG like, but aside from the fact that you're not really leveling up, but you're going on quests, you're doing all these things, you're making choices, and you can tackle things in different ways. Like you branch that out, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now you're playing Chrono Trigger, like, and then or Secret of Mana. Like these games are they're iterative of themselves, and I think it is my favorite favorite genre, um, without a doubt. Like I said, my favorite games are, you know, Persona, like Zelda and Elden Ring, and then my favorite franchise of all time is Pokemon for that same reason. Like I love that these games allow for, if I went and go play Grand Blue, like the story's going to be the same, but like me and you are going to be able to be like, oh, like how did you handle this boss? How did I handle this boss? Like you get your own story while also having this authored experience, typically, which I think is always very, very cool.
Yeah, even listening to Anthony, who we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
on his podcast, the Gaming Trend podcast, he was talking about his experience with Grand Blue and how he spent a lot of his time playing as her name is Zeta, and she uses like this really cool like fire based spear that she can kind of like hit and bounce off and then dive back in and bounce off and dive back in like those types of attacks. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was like I did unlock her eventually, but that was not. I think it was like maybe in the post game by the time I did. So it was like yeah, the way that he played through his game is so different than the way that I played through mine because I was mostly sticking to just using the captain because I just liked her combos.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason why it's always going to be popular, and it's like they also allow for replayability, and I think that for your money's worth, RPGs are always going to be best for your money, because like you
Oh,
mentioned earlier, like yeah, if this is like the only game you're going to buy for the year, like you got a lot to do. Like if I just bought Baldur's Gate and that was the only game I was allowed to play for the rest of the year, I'd be like, okay, well, I got thousands of hours of stuff, because every decision changes things, and it allows for me to spend $70, and then you're going to spend hours upon hours upon hours of gameplay and things like that. Like it's definitely worth your time. But then you also have games like Grand Blue. Like you could probably knock it out in 25 hours, right? I would say on average somewhere between 20 and 25 hours. You probably just went through it really fast cuz 15 hours is crazy fast for an RPG. Um
it
that
is. I think that the average was like 15 to 20 because I was doing some quests here and there, but I was mostly focusing on like what was coming next in the story beats because it was like, yeah, I promise you all I didn't even plan to talk about this game this much
Oh, it's
when we
totally
when
fine.
we
It's
went
like the
live.
newest
Um
RPG.
yeah, but like it is such an anomaly for me because again, this may have been a side effect of me just putting a little bit too much weight on game length back when I was younger, but like I still remember being very disappointed in the first Fable game, as I think a lot of the community was.
Mhm.
But like one of the reasons why is because it was built up to this like huge, massive, like, oh, your choices affect your
Yeah.
fate and whatever. And then the game was over in like 15 hours or like
Mhm.
or maybe even less than that. And I was like, that wasn't that. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Uh, like, where's the rest of the game? Like that was not expansive.
Yeah.
Um, but so like I feel like that could be a downside for some people. But I even saw like even the reviews were like, yeah, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It like gets in and out, and it's a lot of fun, and you can keep playing.
Is it
But it's not
full
playing
priced?
anymore. It is 60, so it's not
60.
like it's
It's
not the
not.
new normal, but it is like the old normal, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Um,
But it
so
also
definitely
has all the
again, like
post games and all that stuff, and it'll probably have DLC, I'm sure. Um,
I think they've already planned some, and yeah, I there were plenty of quests that I didn't do that were available, but I didn't do them during the main, like during my time with the main story. I just did them during the post game. So yeah, if you did take the time to like knock out all the quests as they became available, yeah, you could easily add another 5, 10 hours maybe. Maybe just eye on the side, err on the side of caution and say 5. So
yeah.
yeah, it could easily been more like a 20-hour experience if I had set more time aside for that, but
Well, yeah. I think
just didn't
that's.
happen to do that.
I mean, I think it's good that we do have these, massive, huge. Like I'm gonna play Persona for at least 100 hours. I know Persona 3 is like slightly on the shorter side. At least the original ones were. But then you also have games like Grand Blue or like the Mario RPG series. I think are usually under 30 hours, and then you
Yeah,
have.
that was another one. That was about I think that actually was also about 15 hours for me. The RPG remake for Switch.
Mhm. So, like, I think it's good that there is this mix. You can kind of get what you want and go as deep dive as much as you can or desire to when it comes to these RPGs. But I think we covered a little bit about everything when it comes to RPGs. But our good friend Derek gave us some questions to talk about. When I asked in the Discord, he gave us some questions, and some of them are a little heady for this podcast, Derek. You can keep them on your show where you talk about more in-depth things like that. But I think I'm gonna pick some from the 4 or 5 that he asked us. But I think one of the big ones for me was he said, "Could you share your thoughts on how music contributes to JRPG experience? Are there any soundtracks that have had a lasting impact on you?" Jordan, I'll let you take that first if you have an answer. If not, I have one.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely enhances the experience. I do not play any instruments, but I've always been like, a big appreciator of music. And the RPGs are going to be some of the best music that are going to be coming around for video game soundtracks. I mean, hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Even to get my head in the game on the way home from, taking the kids to swim practice, I was blasting Find the Flame from Final Fantasy 16 in the car.
Yeah,
Like,
you really like that. You really like that soundtrack. I remember you bringing that up during the game of the year.
yeah, and Sea of Stars. So both Final
Oh,
Fantasy 16
yeah.
and Sea of Stars were both on my in my top 5 for the year, even including games that I finished after we had our discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Still ended up in my top 5, both of them did. And both of them just have incredible soundtracks. I mean, like, incredibly memorable. I remember there's at least one track from Final Fantasy 10, like, not like an emotionally resonant one, but just one that, like, always stuck in my head for being kinda funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, so yeah, it's funny how that'll happen like that. I mean, when these games have, like, such a memorable soundtrack, I mean, usually it's for a good reason, not a laughing reason, but
Mm-hmm.
man, does that enhance the experience. I mean,
Yeah.
for anyone who's played Final Fantasy 16 and, like, the scene where you first hear "Find the Flame," I mean, I just got chills just saying those words. Like, I didn't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
describe what the scene is, but I got chills thinking about it. Like, it's just so well timed, so well placed. You know, it's weird that I off the top of my head, I can't think of, like, too much music from Tales of Arise at the moment, but I also, I play a lot of games, so it just
Yeah.
my
You
brain
do.
sucks.
You are a machine. Yeah. I think. I mean, just thinking of Pokemon, right? Like Pokemon
Oh, yeah.
itself is half of the game appeal is probably the music. The other half being the Pokemon themselves. But the music is just so classic and it's so good. And without it, it would be a much different game. But yeah, like I'm gonna constantly bring it up. But yeah, Persona, that music is absurdly good. And I found myself I had just started playing Persona 3 last night, and I found myself like just like closing my eyes and just shaking my head to the battle music and being like, "This is
Oh, yeah.
so insane! Like how good this music is." And everything down to the you know the ambient music that just plays while you're walking around, to the battle music, to characters certain themes, to just the like main title screen is crazy. I was like, this is nuts, this is so good.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah, and I just it's so good. Music is so important to JRPGs in general, and RPGs as well. Like, did you play Elden Ring?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I threw about 170 hours into that game
nice.
when it came like, the year that it came out. I've
Yeah.
put some more into it since then too.
Well, yeah.
Um,
There's hopefully going to be some DLC news pretty soon. That game, spoilers for the final boss of this game and this moment. So like, skip ahead like 30 seconds. When the title music plays when you fight Radigan is
oh
the
my god.
hypest I've gotten. Like when he pulls that hammer up and then the ba, ba, doo, 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 I was like, this is insane that this is happening. Like, oh, I got chills. Like that's one of my
Yeah,
favorite moments ever. It was so insane. I was like, no way. It's the Elden Ring theme song is the final boss of the game. And that's what the
yeah.
final boss should have been, because fuck the Elden Beast. I hate that fight so much.
Don't even
Yeah.
talk about that.
al-
giant space dildo.
almost ruined that game. How bad that fight is, depending on your build. But yeah, music very very important to all games, but especially RPGs. Let's
Yeah, and
see.
like again, we touched on how there's, in some circles you could call it an RPG, maybe not, whatever. But, Zelda, so I'm talking about specifically now Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom.
Mm,
Um, one of the one of the shifts, evolutions, changes, whatever however you want to phrase it, that I really appreciated about Tears of the Kingdom as compared to Breath of the Wild was the music.
yeah,
Because I mean, the music in Breath of the Wild is beautiful,
it's
but it's
subtle.
like
It's subtle.
it's really subtle, which again, they were it was subtle for a reason. It really played into the themes that they were going for the game, but, like, I just really appreciated that even though they still left a lot of the music subtle in Breath and Tears of the Kingdom, they still kinda, like, I don't gave it more oomph, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
for lack of a better term. Like, even the ambient music had more of an impact on my, like, exploration and stuff than it did in Breath of the Wild, and then, oh my the boss themes
Yeah,
in Tears of the Kingdom,
yeah,
absolutely insane.
so good.
I
A
mean,
good boss theme
uh
is like crucial to making a boss memorable.
yeah, and then I'm gonna spoil you've played Tears of the Kingdom yet?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Skip ahead
I think
30
we
seconds again.
yeah, another 30 seconds, but bringing in the main theme as you're diving
Oh yeah,
to catch Zelda, oh,
that
chills
was
again. I
yeah,
mean,
that was my
it
favorite.
was like that was probably my favorite moment of the entire year. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the entire final hour of that game was, like, just one collective, like, just
Yeah,
surprise Pikachu face, like, just
yeah. I couldn't believe that.
ask
Yeah, I couldn't
whatever the
believe
other
what was happening. It was nuts.
yeah, and that's when Link woke up and it was all a dream. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's
So
wild. Can't believe he's Mario. That's wild. And then another question from Derek is, what are some of your favorite character arcs in JRPGs, and why do they stand out to you? And how do you think these arcs enhance the overall gaming experience? So I think tackling this backwards will be good because we can be a little more general. So how do you think these like character arcs enhance the overall gaming experience? Like as characters in a RPG, JRPG, whatever, they are what make these games memorable. If you have bad character arcs and it's just like generic hero goes slays the the bad guy, like yeah, sure, it could be fun. The gameplay is probably good and like whatever, but like the minute details and the subtle like changes in characters and development of characters and actual impact that your choices and actions make is what makes a character like makes an RPG like go from good to great in my opinion.
oh, yeah, I completely agree with that. Like, again, just to bring up Final Fantasy 16 again, I mean, that's what made part of the reason why that game was so incredible to me was the character of Clive
Mm-hmm.
and how his journey and the journey of everyone around him, like, helped emphasize the themes that the game was going for, and also highlight some things that games don't always talk about. Like, yeah, I know Derek and I both kind of talk about this, but just mental health for men being
Mm-hmm.
portrayed in the way that it was in that game, like um, brutally, but at the same time sensitively. Not doing it for shock value, but doing it to show you that like this is the reality for this person. And I even appreciated there was a side quest where like there's like a someone who you would stereotypically like just in the role that this person plays in like their little organization would stereotypically think of him as like a macho person, but
Mm-hmm.
there's like a 3-part side quest, so like it's not like all back to back to back, but it's like oh at this stage in the game like it pops up and then it won't pop up again for another few hours maybe, but like there's like a 3-part side quest about someone noticing that this person just doesn't seem like they're themselves anymore and trying to talk to this person and find out what's going on and try to cheer them up. And like, it's like, this is so cool that they're like, bringing in these things that, mental health specifically
Mm-hmm.
for men and like men supporting each other in those journeys and not just saying like, oh, suck it up and move on. It's like, no, let's deal with this. Let's tackle it head on kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And another game that I really appreciated as far as character arcs and development, again, in relation to how it fed into the themes of the game was Tales of Arise. I actually find a lot of overlap between Tales of Arise and Final Fantasy 16 as far as the themes some of the character arcs, combat systems even, but they're very distinct in how they handle all of those, which is what I appreciate. But yeah, they both of these games deal with some pretty heavy shit. They're
Yeah.
talking about themes of slavery of in one form or other. They're talking about, discrimination in one form or another. They're talking about all these kind of, if you're able to be redeemed after you've done, so much terrible stuff in your life, all these like really heavy things that you don't always expect to see in like a, you know, Tales of Arise is a very colorful, very beautiful
Yeah.
art style, and you don't always expect to hear that. Like, yeah, you look at Final Fantasy 16, it's a lot of blacks and grays and Game of Thrones vibes. So
Yeah.
you're not that surprised to hear some heavy themes from that. But like, no, I was talking with my friend Cayman from Spotlight Games. He and I both are just like huge fans of Tales of Arise, and it's like the places that that story goes it's shocking, like,
Mhm.
actually shocking, and some of the things that you're like, "Did they really just do what?" Like,
Yeah.
and so having people in those types of just really brutal worlds and seeing it reflected in, different personality types, different, hero archetypes of, are they gonna be like the stoic type? Are they gonna be like, the let's just, move on and fix it. Let's, try to remain positive. Like there's so many different characters that they can bounce these themes off of to see how they shift and change over time. And um, those two games specifically have really stuck with me. I mean, obviously, Final Fantasy 16, it's been less than a year, but
Mhm.
Tales of Arise, that was 2021, I want to
Yeah,
say.
something like that.
Because I think that was the year the Metroid Dread came out, so it had no chance of being my number one game of the year, but it was up in the top three for sure.
Yeah.
And I still think about those themes and those characters and like just how great that gameplay experience was.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed like the reason why certain characters like make or break a game. Not to sound like a broken record, I'm not going to like fucking elaborate on this too much, but yeah, Persona 5, like all of the every character, every party member, all your confidants, like they make the game. The combat is fun, the story's pretty good, but like developing relationships with all those characters, finding out what makes them tick, helping them overcome their difficulties with whatever it might be in a way that is unique to you, because you do get to choose whether it's through like a platonic friendship or relationship or something else. The one that stands out to me is Futaba, which is like one of my favorite characters from the game. Is like is she's one of the party members that comes like I think midway through the game, and she is a like recluse, and because of you help her like leave the house and go to the store and like go to high school and do all these things that like when you first meet her she is a complete shut in.
Yeah.
And having that character throughout, like when you say your goodbyes to these characters in the like uh epilogue, it's like devastating because you're like, I helped so many people and
Oh,
now you have to leave. And it sucks, but it's what makes a game so good. So I think
another
character arcs are just like character arcs and music. I think are the backbone, and then you throw in a at least an above average combat system, and you have a good RPG.
in honor of Carl Weathers, baby, you got a stew going.
Yep, you got a stew going. But with that, I think we've covered everything that I feel like needs to be covered when it comes to JRPGs and RPGs in general. If you want to ever submit questions to things like this when we do it between the games, join the Discord. It's in the show notes, like I said, and I'll sometimes ask for some user questions in the short game long talk specific channel, and you can be featured on the show as well. Jordan, it was great having you. Where can people find you?
Great being here, man. Thank you so much for having
Of
me.
course.
Long time fan, first time co-host. Uh, yeah. So again, I'm on the LFG Discord as well. I'm on Discord probably more than I should be, but that's another topic for another day.
He's in every
And also,
channel somehow.
you can't get rid of me.
Yeah.
Again, you can find me on YouTube, Cognitive Clips. If you like to search for your YouTube people by the little at like the little YouTube handle thing, it's Cognitive hyphen Clips.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Threads and Instagram. The channel name is still Cognitive Clips, but yeah, the
It'll all be
Threads
in
and
the show
Instagram are
notes too.
yeah. And then yeah, I also will. I'm also in the discords for the Spotlight Games podcast. So if you ever end up checking them out, which I definitely think you should, they have their own Discord that they post links to as well. So
Nice.
two very fun groups of people that had a lot of fun getting to know over the past year or so. So
Yeah, it's been a good
highly
time.
recommend.
It's been a good time. And you can find us on Threads and Instagram at Short Long Pod. And like I said, the Discord is in the show notes. You can also follow me on Threads and Instagram. The bio, you can just find me there. If you're genuinely wanting to follow me, it's there. But I'm sure Jordan will be on the show again. We'll discuss off mic some possible games we can collaborate on. He is a beast and has more hours in the day than most people somehow, and will probably beat whatever game we assign him in like a day. So we will follow up with that, but be on the lookout for the next episode, which will be with Chris from the Nerdlies. We'll be playing Sucker for Love First Date in semi anticipation. I just checked this morning. The sequel was supposed to come out on Valentine's Day. It does not have a release date yet. So I'm
Oh
very
no.
curious when that's going to happen. But it should be a fun time. I just finished that game yesterday, and it was quite fun. So be on the lookout for that. It'll come out towards the end of this month. If you want to join us, it's like a $5 to $10 game. Probably take you like 3 hours. And if you want to, kind of feel like you're a part of the conversation, you can jump on that. But until next time, don't forget to kidnap your friends. Cool.
That's how I got here.
That is how you got here. I did kidnap you. You're actually in the room with me right now.
When you're not watching Bluey on the TV with the rest of the kids.
Bro, I love Bluey.
Dude, it's so good.
It's so good. That song was stuck in my wife's head like all day yesterday, so that's really funny that you brought that up.
Oh, the theme song?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.